There is an environment in the ocean capable of shutting down an orca's body in a matter of minutes, where if it remains inside for too long, its coordination begins to fail, its muscles lose efficiency, and its ability to control movement starts to collapse. Not because it was attacked, but because the environment itself removes the conditions required for survival. In that space, the water becomes heavier, denser, resisting movement instead of supporting it, forcing the body to work harder while delivering less response, as if every motion is being slowed down from the outside. At the same time, oxygen levels drop to a point where normal biological function cannot be sustained, while toxic compounds build up in concentrations that interfere with the body's ability to operate, creating a condition where even a short exposure begins to trigger a rapid physiological breakdown. For an animal that depends on precision, speed, and full control of its body during every second underwater, that loss of control is not just dangerous, it is fatal. Fish that drift into this environment begin to lose coordination within seconds, their movements becoming erratic before collapsing entirely, as if their bodies are no longer able to process what surrounds them. Some attempt to escape, but the difference in density traps them near the boundary, pulling them downward into a layer where their systems begin to shut down. Others sink deeper and never return. For an orca, entering this environment is a point where its biology stops working, because this is not just a part of the ocean. It is a place where the ocean itself becomes incompatible with life. In this episode, we are going to break down how an environment like this can exist, why it behaves like a lake beneath the sea, and what makes it so lethal that even apex predators avoid crossing into it. If you enjoy exploring hidden parts of the ocean where the rules of survival change completely, this is the channel where we explain the science behind some of the most extreme environments on the planet. Consider subscribing and becoming part of our community. Even if you're watching this on your screen, whether on your phone or TV, just click the subscribe button. To understand why an environment like this is so dangerous, you first need to understand how an orca normally operates, because everything about its body and behavior is built around control, efficiency, and absolute dominance over its surroundings. An orca does not move randomly through the ocean. Every movement is calculated, every dive is controlled, and every action is supported by a system that allows it to function at a level few animals on Earth can match. It can accelerate with precision, change direction instantly, and coordinate with others in complex hunting strategies that depend on timing, communication, and awareness of space. Its body is perfectly adapted to water that behaves in a predictable way. The water that supports movement and allows efficient propulsion. Water that maintains a stable balance of oxygen and chemistry, enabling muscles to respond instantly and the brain to process information without delay. Even during deeper dives, where light disappears and pressure increases, the orca remains in control because the fundamental rules of the environment do not change. The physics remain consistent, the chemistry remains stable, and the animal's entire biology is built around that reliability. But in certain places, those rules begin to break in a way that should not be possible, because here, the ocean separates itself. At first, the change is almost invisible. The water looks the same, the darkness remains absolute, and nothing in the surroundings signals that anything is different. But then a boundary begins to appear, not as a solid line, but as a subtle distortion, a shimmering layer that separates two bodies of water that do not behave the same way. Above it, everything functions normally. Below it, the ocean becomes something else entirely. A dense, heavy mass of liquid settles on the seafloor, forming what looks like a lake trapped beneath the ocean, with defined edges, a visible surface, and even wave-like movements that ripple across it when disturbed. It does not mix with the surrounding water, and it does not disperse. It remains contained as if it belongs to a completely separate system, creating something that should not exist: water inside water, two environments occupying the same space, but following completely different rules. For an orca, this is where confusion begins, because nothing in its evolution has prepared it for an environment where the ocean itself splits into layers that behave differently, where movement becomes inconsistent, and where control starts to slip without any clear reason. As it approaches the boundary, movement begins to feel heavier, slower, less responsive, as if the ocean is no longer supporting the body the way it should, forcing subtle corrections that quickly become harder to maintain. If part of the body crosses into that lower layer, the change is instant. The density increases, movement slows, and the environment begins to interfere with coordination in a way that feels unnatural, as if the body is no longer fully connected to its own actions. At the same time, the chemistry of that trapped liquid begins to take effect, reducing oxygen availability and introducing compounds that disrupt normal biological processes, creating a condition where the longer the exposure, the harder it becomes to react, to recover, and ultimately, to survive. And this is where the danger stops being invisible. What the orca is approaching is not just a strange layer of water, it is something far more extreme. A formation known as a brine pool, a type of underwater lake that forms when water becomes so saturated with salt and minerals that it becomes heavier than the surrounding ocean, separating itself completely and settling on the seafloor as a dense, isolated body of liquid. One of the most well-known examples of this exists deep in the Gulf of Mexico. It is often called the Jacuzzi of Despair, and the name is not an exaggeration, because inside this pool, the conditions are not just difficult, they are lethal. The salinity is so high that the water becomes thick and heavy, making movement inefficient and disorienting for any animal that enters it. At the same time, oxygen levels drop to near zero, removing one of the most basic requirements for complex life to function. But what makes this environment truly dangerous is its chemistry. Toxic compounds, especially hydrogen sulfide, build up inside the pool, creating conditions that interfere directly with cellular processes, meaning that the body is not just struggling to move, it is struggling to operate at the most fundamental level. For small organisms, exposure often leads to immediate collapse. For larger animals, the process may take slightly longer, but the outcome is the same. For an orca, this is a scenario where none of its adaptations provide an advantage. It is a condition the body cannot survive. Even brief contact with this environment can disrupt movement and orientation, and the longer the exposure, the more the body begins to shut down, making escape increasingly difficult as control is lost. Places like this force us to rethink what the ocean really is, because instead of being a single continuous environment where life adapts gradually to depth, pressure and darkness, it reveals itself as a system filled with invisible boundaries, where the rules can change completely without any visible warning. In most of the ocean, even under extreme conditions, life continues to function because the fundamental relationship between the body and the environment remains stable, allowing movement, oxygen exchange, and biological processes to operate within predictable limits that large predators like orcas rely on for survival. But in environments like this, that stability disappears, and what replaces it is not a more difficult version of the same system, but a completely different one, where water no longer behaves as a life-supporting medium, and instead becomes chemically and physically incompatible with complex organisms. For an orca, the difference between complete control and total collapse can exist within a single movement, where crossing an invisible boundary means entering a space where its muscles respond differently. Its coordination begins to fail, and its body starts to operate under conditions it was never built to handle. What makes these underwater lakes truly dangerous is not their depth. their pressure, or even their isolation, but the fact that they remove the very foundation that allows life to exist, creating a scenario where survival is not challenged, but quietly made impossible. And the most unsettling part is that these environments are not rare anomalies, but natural formations that appear wherever the right chemical and physical conditions align, hidden across different regions of the ocean, far below the surface, completely undetectable to anything that does not already recognize the danger. Which means that beneath the ocean we think we understand. There are places where the water itself stops being a habitat and becomes something else entirely, something that does not need to hunt, does not need to chase, and does not need to attack, because it already defines, in absolute terms, what is allowed to survive and what is not. Thank you for watching and taking this journey with us into one of the most extreme and least understood environments in the ocean, where the limits of life are defined not by strength, but by the invisible conditions that make survival possible in the first place. If you enjoy exploring how the natural world really works, from apex predators to the hidden environments that shape their limits, make sure to subscribe and stay with us, because in the next video we are going even deeper into places where the rules of life continue to break in ways that are both fascinating and unsettling. Until the next episode.